Hi there, grade 9s. Welcome to your tangent lesson for today. We're going to review just a little bit of what we covered on Thursday before the Pro D-Day / long weekend and then move forward. So we're looking at trigonometry ratios, trig ratios. And for trigonometry, it's a study of right angle triangles. And you can see right here we have a right angle triangle. Really important to see the 90 degrees because we have to do trig with right angles. Higher level? No, but for us, absolutely. So today we're going to look at the tangent ratio. Tangent ratio has the abbreviation of tan. This is the word that you're going to see on your calculator. And so you'll see on your calculator, you got sine, cosine, tan right there. If you have another calculator, like a graphing calculator, you will see that as well, but you'll probably have to go into your apps. Nope, right here, sine, cosine, tan. Okay, so the tangent ratio is the opposite side divided by the adjacent side. That's the ratio. So what we have to do first of all is label your HOA, hypotenuse side, opposite side, adjacent side. The hypotenuse side is pointed at by the 90 degree sign. So the 90 degree sign points to the hypotenuse, just like we did with Pythagoras. So our angle of interest is indicated on this triangle by the double angle symbol. And so looking at your angle of interest, we draw a straight line to the opposite side of the angle of interest. The opposite side of the angle of interest is called the opposite, and you can abbreviate that OPP. The adjacent side is the only one that's left, and that's why we do it in this order, so you can't screw it up. It's easy, very easy to find the hypotenuse side, and it's very easy to find the opposite side. But the adjacent side, sometimes you guys don't know what it means, but now you do. It means beside or next to. And this one is next to the angle. But the hypotenuse is also next to the angle, but it's special because it's across from 90 degrees. So, now that we're able to label the triangle, we would then have to figure out what the ratio is for the opposite over the adjacent. So remember, ratios can be two things. Ratios can be, number one, they can be fractions, and we're going to be seeing a lot of that in this unit. From fractions, you can also go to the old dots, but you can turn your fractions into decimals, and that's what we're usually when we deal with trig, we're dealing with the decimals. Okay, that's what your calculator is going to tell you. But your calculator can't tell you it unless your calculator is in degrees or DEG. So you got to see that on your screen. Okay, it must be on your screen. What you don't want to see is you don't want to see an R or a rad. That means you're measuring angles in something else. Or a GR or a G, or a grad. That's measuring something else. So it's not graduation, it's just the way they're measuring degrees in a circle. You must make sure your calculator is in D, E, G, or D, or you're not at all going to be able to get any answers right in this entire unit. Now, if it's not, what you want to do is find your D, R, G key and press it. And that's going to change your calculator from degrees to radians to gradients. Or other calculators will be mode. And you may have to press mode once or twice until you see it. So my calculator, this one on the computer is easy. It's DEG. To change it, I would go, how do I change it? There you go, I just press the button. No calculator works like that though. For scientific calculator, I actually have to go in and press mode. Okay, and then I'd have to go down. There, it's always in radians. When you press the reset button on the back, it often goes to radians, always with your graphing calculator. So I change it to degrees and I press enter. Now my calculator's in degrees. Okay. Other calculators work a little bit different. If you need help with your calculator, take a picture, send it to me, and I can help you with it. Okay. Or we can go on the Google Meet and then they'll be really quickly to figure out what's going on. So for tan 12 degrees, it's really simple on your calculator. You have two types. You have the new one, which is my graphing calculator. Those are the newer ones. For that one, if you press tangent, then you will actually see the word on your screen. That's how you know you have a new calculator. If you don't see the word on the screen, then you have an old calculator. Okay? For the old one, there will be no words on your screen. So, and that's kind of old school. That's what that's what I learned on, and you're going to be able to do that one quite easily anyways. Okay, so for this one, you would press 10, you would press 12, then you would press equals, exactly as it's written. And the old school, though, is opposite. You got to press 12, and then you just have to press 10, and the ratio will pop up. You actually don't need to press equals. So let me show you real quick. This is the old school one. I press 12, I press 10, and I write down 4 decimals and stop. So it'll be 0.2125. On the new calculator, I would go tangent. So I press 10, clear all this, 10. See it on the screen? That's why it's a new calculator. Press 12, and then I could use a closing bracket. You don't have to, because I'm not doing anything else. It's not needed, but you will need that closing bracket later. And press equal. Now I could show more decimals, but we only need 4, and we're just truncating. We're not rounding, so that's fine. Truncate means just to write the answer. Okay, so we're not rounding. Truncate, don't round. Now, truth be told, some teachers might say round to 4 decimals. You actually won't get it wrong. But if you use 3 decimals, you will get it wrong. Try the next 2, check with me. Clear. 35.710. 0.7185, 0.7185, and then the next one is 58, 10, 1.6003. So this is when you're finding the ratios and you're given the angle, okay? So you're given 12 degrees, 35.750 degrees. But now we're going to find the ratio, but we're going to find them as fractions. So here we have tan A. That means that is our angle of interest. So you can shade it in if you like. Indicate that that's your angle of interest. It does not change your hypotenuse. Your hypotenuse is your hypotenuse is your hypotenuse. But as we label our HOA, H-O-A, then you can see the opposite side. So from your angle of interest, that is your opposite side. And the side that's left over, well, since there's only one option, it must be the adjacent side. And that's why we label it HOA in that order, hypotenuse, opposite, adjacent. So tan A equals opposite over the adjacent. So as a fraction, opposite side is this one right here. It's side BC. And the adjacent side is right here, AC. Okay? Or you could use your lowercase letters. What would be your lowercase letters? Well, let's label it. If this is big C, the opposite is little c. This would be little a because it's opposite capital A. And this would be little b. So using the lowercase letters, you could say A over B. All right? Either one is fine. And most of you, since you're given the capitals, you're probably just going to label it using the capitals. Now, what if we change the angle? Do we change the ratio? Well, in fact, we do. Because if we look at angle B, then this becomes our angle of interest. And so what happens, according to angle B, is this side is the opposite. So the opposite switches sides, and the adjacent switches sides. So this ratio for tangent B then becomes AC, the opposite side AC, over BC. You'll notice that what happens? Crisscross, right? They get flipped. When you change the angle, you change the HOA. All O and A's change. Now, if you're using the lowercase letters, well, This would be little b, this would be little a, so your ratio would be b over a. And again, it's either. Okay, either use the capitals or the lowercase. Most likely you're going to use the capitals because that's what's given. All right, labeling your HOA. Here we go. Next. Okay, so just to review, tangent is opposite over hypotenuse, so you can write down tan theta equals opposite over adjacent. Okay, so the first thing you do, number one, is you label your HOA. That's step one. Label your HOA, hypotenuse, opposite, adjacent. So for angle A, that's our angle of interest. Start by labeling your hypotenuse across from 90 degrees. So you find that little corner and you draw an arrow from the little corner to the opposite side. That's your hypotenuse. From your angle of interest, that would be your opposite. And the side that's left over is your adjacent. And so as a fraction then, instead of just writing opposite over adjacent, you would actually fill in the numbers represented by those sides. So as a fraction, you would get 12 over 15. There you go. That's your ratio. You could turn it into a decimal, but we're not going to do that till the next question. But remember, fractions should always be in lowest terms. So what we can do is divide them both by 3. Divide by 3, divide by 3. So that equals 4/5 lowest terms. Now, tan B. So looking at tan B, this is in blue. Okay. For tan B, it's still opposite over adjacent. That's not going to change. It'll always be the same for tangent. But guess what? This is the opposite side according to angle B. This is the adjacent side. So when you change your angle, you change your HOA. Very important. So now it becomes 15 over 12. The fraction is flipped because the sides are flipped. But lowest terms, always, it becomes 5 over 4. Okay, so most of us, now this is kind of what we do now, is we leave them mostly as fractions, but sometimes you'll say go to decimals after you find the fraction. So let's go and practice this question here. Label your GOA, label your HOA. Do it now, label your HOA. Okay, so now that you labeled your HOA, this is your hypotenuse. This is your, for tan theta, that's your opposite side. And this would be the one that's left over, your adjacent side. So opposite over adjacent would be 28 over 22 as a fraction. But now you got to turn that fraction into a decimal. So you always go fraction first, then you switch it to a decimal. So tan theta as a decimal equals, I simply divide 25 divided by 22, and I truncate. So it's 1.1363. Okay, so 1.1363. All I did was divide, exactly what it's telling me to do. Now, tan beta is a new angle, so it's a new HOA. Label your HOA for tan beta, GOA. So this is your opposite for tan beta. That's the opposite side, and that's the adjacent side. They switch. Okay, so now your fraction is flipped, 22 over 25. And don't be lazy. It's not going to be anywhere close to the same decimal. The fraction's inverted. So now tan beta equals, and I go to my calculator, and I simply divide my fraction. I'm turning my fraction ratio into the decimal ratio value, 0.88. Okay, you don't need to write 2 zeros afterwards because you simply have put it, you just don't need that, right? Because it doesn't change the value of the number. Okay. Next, now you're changing the angle to the nearest degree. So now we've actually told you what the ratio is. We've told you the ratios. You got to figure out what the angle actually is. So it's the next step. So what you have to do is move tangent to the other side. So in order to move, you have to move by, what's your algebra rules? Doing the opposite. So you move by doing the opposite of tan. That's different. Okay, so what is the opposite of 10? That's the question. The opposite of 10 is tan negative 1. Now, so tan negative 1, theta, alpha equals tan negative 1, 1.237. So this is actually technically called arctan, but because of technology and calculators, we often just call it inverse tan. And some will just say second function tan. But the true math name is arctan. Okay, so then what we do is we go to our calculator, and our calculator will pop this answer out for us. However, you got to know whether you have a new or an old calculator. So for a new calculator, it's simple. You actually press your tan negative 1 button, which you have to get by going second function tan to get the writing with the tan minus 1. So you actually have to go second function tan negative 1. Okay. And then you press 1.237 and you press equals, and the answer pops up. For the old school calculators, you would simply go 1.237 and then you go second function so that the tan negative 1 pops up, and then you press tan negative 1. And then the answer goes on your screen. You don't actually need to press equals. So let me show you those real quick. This is an old school calculator. So I enter in 1.237. I go second function. Where is this? Hello, hello, second function. Right here. And so then now I see the tan negative 1 writing. So I press the button, and that's my answer, 51 degrees. So for these answers, we usually round to a whole number, 51 degrees. Let's just show you that with a new calculator. So on the new calculator, I have to go second function. Oh, I gotta turn it on first. Why is it not on? Press on. There we go. So clear. I go second function, and now I can press tan, and it goes to yellow writing up top. The yellow writing up top says tan negative 1. Press that, and look on my screen, it says tan negative 1. And then I enter 1.237. Now I could close that off with brackets, so I have a closed off number. It's up to you, you don't have to, but later on you're going to, so you may as well go and practice it now. Press enter, 51 degrees. There we go. Okay, now here we have a fraction 3 over 4. No big deal, same thing. We gotta move tan to the other side. So to do that, we leave x by itself. We're not gonna touch that. And you must write that there. You can't leave it blank. And that equals tan negative 1. Now what I like to do is I like to enter the fraction on my calculator. But some people don't. But I can use, if I use brackets, I can use my division. So on a calculator, what that's going to look like is you're going to use your brackets, especially the new calculators. The old calculators, you don't have to. But just to remind you, that fraction is also division. So I actually don't, this is kind of what I do on my calculator. This is my work. Okay, so that's what I write down as my work. So on my calculator, I have to go and use my old calculator. So for my old calculator, I will go 3 divided by 4, and now I press equals. That is the division answer. So then I go to second function, tan negative 1. So there's tan, second function, inverse tan, so tan negative 1. That's the answer, 37 degrees. Notice you round it to a nearest whole number. So for angles, the rule generally is round to a whole number. On a new calculator, okay, new calculator, it's just as slick. You go type it in as you see it. So second function, there we go, tan negative 1, and you can see that appears on screen. And then I enter in 3 divided by 4. Now here's the trick. I must have that closing bracket. If I do not have that closing bracket, then I'm saying take tan negative 1 of 3 and divide that answer by 4. But I don't want that. I want 3 divided by 4 tan negative 1. So I got to have my brackets there. And voila, 37 degrees rounded to a whole number. Okay, you try the next one all by yourself now. And here's the next one. Move tan to the other side. So it becomes tan negative 1. And I have 4.5 divided by 6.3. I write it as a fraction though, because I'm smart enough to know that's also a division. Old school calculator, I'll do the division. So I will go 4.5 divided by 6.3 and do the division by pressing equal. Now that the division is done, I go second function, tan negative 1. That's my answer, 36 degrees. Don't forget, round that up. So angles, you round to a whole number. Okay. Try a new calculator. Here we go. I enter in as you see it, so I'm going to clear it. You don't need to clear, I just want to show you fresh. So second function, tan, and because I want tan negative 1. Now with tan negative 1 up there, I can go 4.5 divided by 6.3, and I have to close that off. I need to tell my calculator, do that division first. So closing bracket. Now I'm telling my calculator, idiot, do that division first. And then find tan negative 1. So I calculator, you're not stupid. You're a good calculator. Press enter. Good, 36 degrees. Okay. So you got to make sure you use your brackets. Now in the olden days, we would have to turn these into decimals. Turn that into a decimal, turn that into a decimal, and with your 4 decimals, then you go and answer the question. Okay, so all the questions in the olden days, we wouldn't be able to do this, but calculators are more powerful now. So we can leave it as a division with our brackets, and then the calculator will turn it into a decimal like question number 1. Okay, here we go. Next one, full meal deal. Find the missing angle. So we're looking for angle W. So for angle W, I label my HOA. GOA, label the HOA. Start with hypotenuse, 90 degrees, straight across. Angle of interest is W, so according to W, this would be my opposite, and the one that's left over is adjacent. So now you have 3 lines of work. You will say tan W equals. That's super important. Without that, you ain't getting full marks. So write it down. Then I'll let you cheat. I'll say you can fill out your fraction. So 3.6, the opposite side. 3.6 is the opposite over the adjacent of 5.2. Now, next line of work is you move tan to the negative side. So tan to the opposite side becomes negative 1. So 3.6 divided by 5.2, and you have to do the division by having a bracket there. Okay, so I'll do my calculator, the new school calculator first. So the new school calculator, we will go, I like it right there. So second clear, second function, tan negative 1, 3.6 divided by 5.2, close it off. So gotta have that bracket there at the end, press equals, and that rounds to 35 degrees. 35 degrees. Okay, on the old school calculator, I will go 3.6 divided by 5.2, so I got to get that. That's my ratio right there, and then I can go second function, tan negative 1, 35 degrees. There you go. Determine the measure of angle V. So we will go find angle V. So according to angle V, I will then use my red writing. For angle V, guess what? Your hypotenuse and your doesn't change, but your opposite and adjacent do change. So I will write down tan V equals, tell me the numbers as a fraction. So we saw earlier that the fraction flips because your HOA flips, O and A flip. Move tan to the other side, tan negative 1, and now I got to use brackets. I have to be able to describe doing that division, and then I can go to my answer. So I will go inverse tan, so inverse tan, or arctan, 5.2 divided by 3.6, close it off, and I get 55 degrees. Now, was there an easier way? You betcha. Guess what? I could have gone 180 minus 90 minus 35. That also equals 55 degrees. We'll be doing that lots in 3 lessons. Okay, last little bit of work here now is you're going to find missing sides. Okay, so you're finding missing sides. These are the only 2 questions other than the angles that I can ask. So find missing sides, you start by labeling your HOA. Now, since we know 58 degrees, that is our angle of interest. So we will label our HOA based off 58. Start with H, then O, our opposite, and the side left over is the adjacent. And because we don't know anything about the hypotenuse, we say we're only dealing with the opposite and adjacent side. So you start by writing down the ratio. Tan 58 degrees equals, what's the fraction? Well, opposite is side x, and the adjacent is side 14. So any time you do this, you must have 1, 2, 3 spots filled out. Those 3 things are going to change according to your triangle. Now, what we want to do is get rid of this divide by 14 because our goal is to get x all by itself. So this 14 has to move to the other side. So what we have here is we have divide by 14. So what's the opposite of divide by 14? Times by 14. So times by 14 and times by 14. So what we're left with is x does not change. X does not change, it stays on the right side. And we get 14 times tan 58 degrees. Now, what Mr. Barker likes to do is I don't like to write the multiplication sign. I actually like to write brackets. Because this whole tan 58 degrees is a ratio, it's an entity, I like to show that by using brackets for my multiplication. Okay. Now you go to your calculator. So for the new calculators, okay, so if you have a new calculator, you type it in as you see it. You would press 14 times, and then you would press tan 58, and then you press equals. For an old calculator, you got to do a little bit different. For an old school calculator, you will go 14 times 58, then tan. Now this is where you got to be careful because that's just going to show you the decimal ratio of tan 58. Then you got to press equals to do the multiplication. Okay, I'll show the old school calculator first because it's a little bit more tricky. So I will go 14 times 58, and I want tan 58, so I got to press tan. So that's tan 58. Now in order to do the multiplication, I got to press equals. So that's the multiplication. Now since it's a side, we round our sides to 1 decimal. So 22.4. On a new calculator, I'll show you what that looks like. You just type it in exactly as you see it. 14, sorry, clear so you can see it all nice and neat. 14 times tan 58, and then you could use a closing bracket. That's optional in this situation. 22.4, same length. Okay, so that's finding a missing side when the unknown is on the top. Really simple. Next one, we are going to go and label our HOA. So we're going to find Y. So we're going to find side Y. So label your HOA, GOA. Hypotenuse is across 90 degrees. The opposite side is opposite the angle that's given to us because that's our angle of interest. And the side that's left over is the adjacent side. So for this one, it's not got a space here, we will say tan. There must be a number in between tan and the equal sign or a letter. You can't have that blank. And then our opposite is 3, the adjacent is Y. So this is where it gets a little bit crazy. Y is on the bottom, makes it a bit challenging. The first thing we have to do is multiply by Y to get it out. So times both sides by Y. Right side cancels, we're left with Y times tan 60 degrees equals 3. Now we have to divide both sides by tan 60 degrees. So divide by tan 60 degrees to move it to the other side. Tan 60 degrees. Okay, so we have to divide by tan 60 degrees to move to the other side. And so we're left with here is y equals, that side doesn't move, 3 divided by tan 60 degrees. Okay. Now, we can then go to our calculator and figure out what y equals. Most of you, for your work, are going to be showing this. I'll highlight what you're going to show. You're going to show tan 60 degrees equals 3 over y. Some of you will show you the middle step, but most of you will skip right to y equals 3 divided by tan 60. And I'm kind of okay with that. Usually for the middle step, what I write down is y equals y times tan 60 equals 3, and then I go to the other part. Okay, y equals 3 divided by tan 60. But this part does show you how to move the tan 60. We're using all our algebra skills that we just finished learning. Okay. Now, on your calculator, if you have a new calculator, you type it in as you see it. It's really easy. You go 3 divided by, and then you press tan 60, and then you have to press equals. And it'll do your division. On an old school calculator, it's a little bit different. On an old school calculator, you go 3 divided by 60, then you press 10, then you press equals. And it's important to press equals, otherwise it won't actually do the division. Okay, so let's practice this and show you. I'll show you the old school first. 3 divided by 60 tangent. Now that's only tan 60, so now I press equals to do the actual division. And the side length is 1.7. Okay. Try it on the new calculator. So we go 3, nope, turn it on, clear, 3 divided by tan 60. And then I don't have to have my closing bracket, but it's good practice too. Then I press equals 1.7 as well. So long lesson today, but you got to slog through it. There'll be less work tomorrow. Then it'll be easier on 2 classes from now. And then you got to slog through it, okay? All right. Happy learning.